with the best father and son team on the internet. It's time for Homie and the Dude.
What is happening, everyone? This is Homie and the Dude, the father and son TTRPG content creation team. We are really delighted to have Logan, aka Runesmith, join us today. Logan, we have been speaking behind the scenes for seems like a couple months now, and have really enjoyed that, but have been really looking forward to having an extended conversation with you. So thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's nice to talk outside of emails for once.
Absolutely.
100%, dude, 100%. Look, I wanted to dive in straight away with something that really interests me about the content that you make, because you make it seems like an exceedingly wide variety of content. You've got things from advice videos, to like tips and tricks on how to maximize or like use certain classes in certain ways, and all this kind of stuff, as well as also then gaming content, and you've just got a massive array. How do you, like, week to week go, you know what, this week I'm going to try this? What's the selection process? How does Runesmith get to choosing what you record, what you like make on a week to week basis?
Well, a lot of the ideas that I have, I try to keep some level of spontaneity where I'm not searching other people's channels and going, oh, that's their idea, let's go with like what works. It's fun to just sort of, as I'm playing D&D, which is an amazing gift to get every week, which I don't have. I know some other people are able to consistently do that, but whenever I get to play D&D, it's such a great well of inspiration for like, oh, this works, or like this type of game design is really exciting to me. I want to share that with other people. I want them to take the experience that I have and make it their own in a certain way. But for the majority of the videos that I do, I feel like the range of my content can sort of be simmered down to monster highlights to some degree. I would say that's the vast majority, if not encounters or that old series where I would do fake animal documentaries. But just cracking open any of the monster manuals or any of the books that they'd, ideally the early ones, because the recent ones don't really have that much content, and just trying to pull sort of out all the roots from this monster or this concept that they've presented and created and designed, and showing people almost a templatized version of it. So your question being the week to week, I think it's the first 2 days of just hammering through all the books and then hammering out the script, recording it that same day. And then the editing is the most grueling process of that takes 4 or 5 days.
Yeah, that sounds hella familiar.
And your editing is pretty
slick.
It's very slick. Yeah, I mean, you can
Thank
tell
you.
that you've been. It's kind of symbolic of, everyone has their own style and everything, and you can tell a Runesmith styled edit. And
Yeah.
I guess you could say the same thing with other content creators, but you definitely have
It is kind of funny that I've moved into a more heavily edited, like I think Internet Historian has a higher paced version of what I do. I moved away from sort of the almost JonTron style that XP to level 3 works on a lot, where it's a mix of these edits and these captions like slideshows and then a lot of live action. But when I moved away and when I started doing more of my own content, I'm not someone who's comfortable being alone with a camera talking to it like it's a person. So me falling behind not being able to use a camera or video footage in my videos has, I think, led me to develop that style.
Yeah.
It's a super sick style, and that's super interesting. You seem, for all intents and purposes, very comfortable in yourself and very comfortable in the place that you kind of bring this content from and whatnot.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I was just gonna say, you mentioned two sides of it. One was like being aware of other people's styles, like XP to level 3, but also getting yourself into a mindset of, I'm consuming other people's styles. I'm seeing what's successful out there. I'm seeing what's actually not doing so well out there, and trying to make sure that you have a filter of like, I wanna make sure as much as I can that I'm not, like comedians, because they're around other people that are telling jokes, thousands of jokes. At some point, someone will say, yo, that joke sounds very much like that joke. Like, it's hard to not let that stuff seep into your own content creation. How do you do that? How do you like make sure that you're separating, even though you're seeing oh shit, like Baldur's Gate 3, that shit is kicking off right now. I need to
Yeah.
do something about that. Or like this, it looked like it was going to be hot, but I don't see like
Bugbears.
Yeah.
Hey, Bugbear. You know, and,
Yeah.
other people have done videos about bugbears. You know.
how do you balance the two of like being aware of what's
Great
going
question.
on in the community, but also, kind of
Yeah,
being true to your own stuff?
I genuinely think that balance is kind of the perfect word for it. It's a mixture of seeking things out on my own and finding them organically, and then, seeing what my friends are making and appreciating it more than wanting to copy it. Because, if I just see what works and I just do what works, I'll lose myself. I won't have any sort of independent personality to lean on. I'll just become a copy. So I like. I don't know, maybe it's sort of an anxiety that leads me to develop that need to be much more independent in my style and sort of how the videos function. But I don't consume an excessive amount of content like my own, and I think that kind of makes it naturally uh, a bit more unique.
Mm.
Dude, that's a super interesting point. I actually want to circle back to something you said earlier, but
Mhm.
that's a super interesting point because, like, we make a couple of actual play series, and we do a couple of other little things. But I don't really at this point I don't consume many actual plays. I actually
Mhm.
don't consume much of that kind of stuff. I typically stay away from it a
Mm.
little bit just because, again, I I hope that whatever I'm creating is unique. Obviously, as GMs, we draw on all of the
Yeah.
content and things that we've consumed throughout the years and things that have been in existence that we pull upon and take pieces of and things like that.
Mhm.
Um, but the super interesting point that you just made. I wanted to just touch on. You said earlier that you don't get to play D&D weekly or things like that. Are you more of a player or more of a GM? Are you a forever GM or are you a bit more of a
Um,
player?
I think I've found my groove more in being a player. I was a forever GM for a while. I feel like everyone does their time. It's like, you have to work in the service industry, you have to go to McDonald's, you have to be a GM for a few years. Um, it's super fun to just spend a lot of time by yourself world building and
Mhm.
translating that into playing with your friends. It's a completely different thing. You're going from being an author to being an improvisational actor, and you
Yeah.
have to meld those two. So it's a lot of fun just to kind of turn your brain off and not do the author part for a little while and just be that character, just be that actor. I do a character who's a little kobold like ringleader in Joe Cat's game.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's something of Elinthi, Saviors of Elinthi, and it's so much fun just to work with the other players and collaborate as you're building the story and be more supportive to the GM than actually be the GM.
Yeah.
You're
Oh,
you're just saying the same thing, weren't you? Like
yeah.
you would consider yourself a forever GM, but you're
100%.
enjoying the hell out of being a player on a cast right now.
Yeah, do you know what's interesting? I feel like, I am very much a forever GM. My controllingness needs me to be
Mm,
able to do all that, and we talked
it
about
is
this in another.
fulfilling.
It is.
Deeply satisfying.
It's also I feel like we mentioned this earlier as well in a different podcast that I find I hit the flow state a lot more as a GM than I do as a
Mm,
player. I often find myself as a player stepping out of the moment, looking at my character sheet and being like, okay, fuck, like action economy. What am I going to use to help my team here? What's then
yeah.
also what can I use, and then how can I creatively use that to make it interesting for people who are watching or other players at the table, or
So being
assist someone
a
else.
player is more stressful for you would say?
In a weird way, it is a
That's
lot more.
interesting.
It's a lot more stressful in of that I feel like I there's a little bit more pressure on me, which is super weird. But in the same way, I also recently have been playing. I play in a weekly game on a Monday, and it has allowed me to enjoy like the GM. We've had two like massive cliffhangers recently where we found out that this council of elders are fucking like just evil as shit and like are just
Mhm.
like polluting the whole city that they are in, as well as also then one of our like GM NPCs that was part of the party that like me personally, I think he's my favorite GM NPC that I've ever seen, even more than all of the ones I've created. And I just loved him. And he recently, his warlock patron just like captured him and was like, "Fix this, or and you don't get it back until it's fixed." And you know, both of these like cliffhangers that we were given, I got to experience from the other side because as a GM, I know what's coming. I know that I'm like, you know, I know that, you know, as you guys are ticking towards something, I'm prepping and I know what I'm going to kind of tease with, and I know that I'm going to drop this little thing at the towards the end and, you know, tease this kind of stuff. To be on the other side of that and to be like, oh my God,
Yeah.
what the fuck is happening has been a really beautiful experience for me. That's been something
It's
I've really
sort of the difference between watching a movie and reading the Wikipedia plot.
Yeah.
It's so much more exciting when you don't know what's coming and when you get to enjoy that pacing.
Totally, dude. That's a really good analogy. A really, really good analogy. So you say you don't play super, super often. How, if you could ideally, you know, how many games a week, if life was permitting, you know, relationships, work, you know, whatever was permitting, how often would you get at the table if you feasibly could?
I think right now, in just the pace that everything in my life is going, I think one weekly game would be great, and maybe one bi-weekly game, but nothing crazy. I couldn't, even as a player or like a DM, to sit down every week and commit to that on top of a bunch of other projects. It can get to be a little overwhelming, even though it's hanging out with friends.
I think
Dude,
weekly is a good rhythm as well because you feel like
you don't forget things.
yeah, exactly. You more or
Mhm.
less remembered where you left off.
Yeah.
You've
And
like entrenched into your character. Your character is, you
yeah,
know, you're not separating so much from your, like we have another actual play that we do that has been we do a long session and then we chop those sessions up into episodes. So we'll do like
mm,
maybe a 4 or 5 hour session, but we'll only do that once a month or maybe even once every 2 months. And because of our illness recently, it's going to be
mhm.
now like 3 months since we've seen
Oh,
them. Like the story has been so on pause for such a long time, but we've been doing this game for about a year that in effect we all still know our characters and it'll still slot in
yeah.
just nicely. But weekly is a really nice rhythm that you just kind of feel like it's
I
I don't
would
know.
also say I would almost compare it to like back in the day, the Saturday morning cartoons, how you have something to look forward to and you're still invested, and it's almost a motivator to kind of get through the week and accomplish what you're doing so you can get back to that. But when you have it bi-weekly, especially if it's the same game, which I've never heard of that, but that would be sort of like living a double life. You're getting stressed about your character, you're getting stressed about what you're doing. So I think a week is good.
Nice, yeah. I love that Saturday cartoon analogy. Dude, that shit is so lost nowadays. Like if you say that
Yeah.
to anyone under the age of like 18, they're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
I do
Comedy
not.
Central, what is that?
Yeah, Cartoon Network. Are you kidding me? You know, like,
Cartoon
yeah.
what? I'll never forget my dad's old story where he would have like lemonade stands out on Saturday and he would run in just to watch Popeye just when it was on and then run back out.
Dude, I love Popeye. I love Popeye
Yeah,
as well.
Popeye's great.
Darn, yeah.
I think the other thing that you mentioned that's interesting as well is as a player being on the recipient end of, you know, the puppeteer's strings.
Hmm.
And if it's done really well, like I know we've been in a game once where there was a suspenseful
Oh, God,
moment
yeah, I
that
know
was
what you're
just
talking
like
about.
the suspense was completely, it blindsided us, but it blindsided us through a small drip feed, right? So we were in this really like beautiful, lovely little village that we had encountered.
We just
It
come
had
out of
been like
combat.
foreshadowed the whole
Oh,
time.
no, so we just come out of combat. We were super damaged. We were like, oh, thank God, a village where we can rest and heal and
Hmm.
like
And
get
look,
back
there's
to
a
everything.
bonfire, and there's people eating, and there's merriment and
Yeah.
joyfulness.
Yeah, and
Depends on your GM what that means.
yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
It just got creepier and creepier, and then at some
Yeah.
point, like, you know, we're all looking at each other and we're like, nah, there's something real, real wrong here. But the way he did it was brilliant. Like that slow build on the recipient as a player on the recipient end was beautiful. Like for us to go through that emotional arc of like, and then it's like, oh no, no, this is really not good. And then for it to kick off into full on like chaos was just beautifully done. So when a GM can create, it doesn't necessarily have to be just suspense, but can create like a moment for you is a beautiful thing. It's like a, you know, the director in a movie, but in real
Hmm.
time is a pretty special talent to be able to do.
100%,
Absolutely.
dude. I fully agree with you. I think it's one of those skills that is, you know, it's one of those skills that at times can be lost. I feel like if if you're too overt as a GM, it can become bland. If you're too covert, it can become bland. I
Yeah.
think you need to hit that balance
Yeah.
really nicely.
I found being too covert is a big problem. That's always like my biggest failing as a GM was the end of the first long running live game that I did with a TPK, because the characters were completely blind just blind to everything I was doing and orchestrating. And I was like, please investigate. And they didn't. And they ran into a big blatant trap where it was borderline like rocks fall on you if you run in here kind of thing.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, we've been in situations like that where, like, you can, as the GM, be like, damn it, it was so obvious. Like, all they needed to do was just be a little bit more observant. But in retrospect, like,
it's just players. You're not working with written characters that like you can they're going to be motivated the entire time. You need a bit of hand holding to get through those bottlenecks.
Exactly. And I think there's an element of like GM responsibility. Like if you have to really thread the needle of, it has to be challenging enough for them for it to be difficult to get through a certain situation, whether it's a puzzle or a challenge or a combat or something like that, but not so challenging that they're missing the thing that you prepared for so well. Like this is the real thing that they're going to get like such impact from. They're going to enjoy the hell out of this, or this is going to be wild when it happens. They didn't fucking do it. They went right. I think they were supposed to go left. What? How did that happen?
You can't keep it hidden. That's such a big thing. And there's a short analogy, I forget if I heard it or came up with it a while ago, but just the idea of, if you have a jungle temple at like next to a city and you want the players to go there, like that's the whole thing that you want them to do, and for some fucking reason they go fishing, that's a sunken temple. You convert it. You keep it in front of them no matter where they're going. You just change the details. You got to keep the ball rolling.
You used to do it as well. You'd be like,
I used to go, do you want to go left or right, guys? And they'd be like, right. I'd be like, sick.
The illusion of choice,
yeah, exactly. That's it. And do you know what's an interesting one? Because it's something that I tend to try to avoid as a dungeon master, typically. And across the board, you know, whether I'm dungeon mastering for D&D or I'm GMing for like Orbital Blues or, you know, another system that we've played and enjoyed, I tend to avoid murder mystery or like mystery style stuff, typically. I tend to...
It's very hard to do.
Right,
in like a live play way.
Yeah.
Because you never see murder mystery done in like improv groups. No. They don't know where to go. It's really hard.
Exactly. And you're 100% right. And I think as a GM, what you learn, and recently I had one of our employees, Emily, wanted to... She was like, I've got this idea for this series. I want to test it out with you, Bodhi. Let's make a pilot. I want to make it, and she ran it, and it was like a murder mystery in this house, and we were trying.
I've never even seen that content.
Me neither. And she wanted it to like go this certain way, and when the conclusion came, the ideas, the concepts that I had in my head, I was so far away from what is actually happening here that like. And what it comes down to is something that I've learned, and now I feel like I'm a lot better at, is when you're giving people clues, you need to have, like, if you're in a room and you're like, cool, this is the room where they're going to find the clues, have 100 clues in that room, not 2. You need to have, like, almost everything in that room needs to be something that they can discover that can lead them to the thing, you know, and it needs to be like, and it also... in a weird way, pieces of the puzzle. Like I remember we did one a very long time ago where I had you guys searching in the Fishbowl Tavern, and I gave you guys 3 pieces of information. I gave them a note that was written in a language that they couldn't understand, a chemical vial from a certain place that they needed to go to, and a ring that belonged to someone who was also there, basically. And between the 3, I remember them collecting all the 3 or 4 pieces of this evidence. And then suddenly, I think it was my mother who was like, oh.
Might have been Nikki.
Yeah, it was like, oh shit, like I suddenly get it. Like this piece connects to this.
Yeah.
And you need to have all that stuff there, because if you have just, you know, 1 or 2 things, like
that's
you said,
true,
it can just be missed.
I would build on that, ironically pertaining to a fishbowl. You can't forget the power of a red herring.
Yes.
All the best murder mysteries, and I think you sort of enlightened me to this thought process, but the importance of having a bunch of misdirection in a mystery keeps the players engaged without telling them what happened. You're telling them something happened, but as long as you keep feeding them all these clues, like the game clue, you have everyone's a suspect, everyone had a murder weapon, and the Murder on the Orient Express, and even the pseudo parody that I did in Twisted Taverns, the Rail Away. There's a murder mystery, and like there's 5 suspects, and the idea is all of them would have killed them. Knives Out even does this. It's like everyone was planning on it. It's the question of who the fuck got to it first, and that's what makes the mystery so engaging. Is you're like, okay, we know all the why and all the how, but we need to know the when and the who. And that's more fun to build around than like just barely planting these seeds and giving your characters like they're walking through saplings. That's not fun.
Yeah.
Dude, it's such a good point. Like, and do you know what? Ah, man, poor Daniel Craig in fucking Knives Out. Dear fucking God, that poor
accent,
that poor
that
guy.
Louisiana accent.
That poor guy.
I just hated the "it's you."
Yeah, yeah,
Too. That a pun cannot be your twist. That's bad.
yeah. No. I fully agree with you though. The fact that you need to have multiple sources of possibly something happening for a murder mystery to work is so important, because that's the thing. Like, if you're just investigating one track, like there's never, and no detective in all of history of real life, forget fucking fiction, no detective in history has gone, I know who I'm going to question, and they're going to lead me to the next thing, and that's going to just snowball from there. They're like, okay, I'm going to go talk to the mother, the daughter, the boyfriend. I'm then going to go look at security cameras. I'm then going to go do fingerprints. I'm then going to
and then I'm going to stare at my flip book for 6 hours looking at everything I just learned.
Exactly. And like, that's so true, man. Fuck, man, that's so true. And you know what? It fills me with confidence to run more of those.
I was thinking the same thing. Like, there's some food for thought in doing another murder mystery with multiple suspects.
Yeah, I would also say that Eldritch horror plays into this really well, in the sense that the type of narratives they usually do. I think Innsmouth is a good example. There is a mystery, and it seems really complex and elusive, but the fact of the matter is the mystery you're investigating is so small compared to what you're actually finding out. So like, Colonel Mustard did it with the candlestick in the bedroom, but he did it because he's sating this eldritch god in the basement you didn't know about. And it's this fun sort of tumble down into something like that.
I love it.
Dude, that's such a good point about the eldritch stuff, especially just as well because it's such a good motivator. Like, I often find like one of the hardest things to do, because often they say, when you're writing a murder mystery, start with the end, put your clues backwards, and work.
I say that with almost every narrative, start at the end.
Dude, right. Shit, dude. I feel like that's right. Here, I'm just going on a little tangent right here, because I feel like it's a real thing in the D&D community. I know that everyone wants fucking sandbox. I know. I fully understand that everybody is like, sandbox, I want my ideas to matter.
Yeah.
But if you really do sandbox, if we're being 100% honest, if you do sandbox, nothing happens, because you're just kind of doing very small things, like,
and they can be diverse things as well.
I was gonna say, if you don't know the wider picture, then how do you know what the small things then don't matter? Almost to me, it's like
you could use just a literal translation. Like, if you're playing in a sandbox, you can't build a castle because it'll fall apart. Like, you're playing with sand. I like the idea of having that final point, that culmination of everything you're about to come up with. That's a lot of fun to start there and work backwards.
100%. Like, could you imagine if it was like, Lord of the Rings, and it's like there's no like Frodo putting the ring in Mount Doom? Like, could you imagine if the whole thing is just him being like, I don't know where we're going, Sam, but we're taking the ring somewhere,
we're on
buddy.
an adventure. Yeah,
exactly. And you're like,
we're gonna go meet a little creature.
Yeah, exactly. You just feel like this doesn't make any fucking sense. So I fully agree with you there, dude. I fully agree with you there. You know what? You mentioned earlier about the monsters, and we just talked about eldritch stuff. I've been super curious to ask you. combat and things like that in D&D can get very stagnant. A lot of times
Yeah.
people are like, oh, I'll just choose a creature that has resistances to what my players are good at, and oh, I'll just do this. What's something for you, dude, that enhances a creature to make it not just the stat block or the lore in the book, but something that like makes it tangible, makes it scary, makes it like more of a problem for your players to try and problem solve that moment? What's something that you use on your end for that?
That's a really good question. I had a train of thought and then I lost it as you continued the question.
Sorry, my
I would
apologies.
say, in terms of combat, giving creatures reactions, like resistances and then vulnerabilities is always fun. It always spices it and mixes it up to like, oh, the players can problem solve actively. But I think when you break it down, you want that creature to have a reason to be there other than just fight. And generally, like it happens almost every combat in D&D. You walk in there, you roll initiative, you walk out with bloody hands. Like the creatures, even animals and stuff, they're gonna run away if you start beating the shit out of them. Like if you're beating up a bear and it's down to like 16 hit points, it's gonna get the hell out of there. It lost. Like it doesn't need to die. That or if you want a more impactful monster, I think my suggestion would be, and the thing that I play with a lot is just very simply the creature's motivation and how long it's been planning this, like why it's there, why it's present, and if it has other stuff in the background that makes it more complicated than just fighting it.
Dude, I freaking love that. I absolutely love that thought process. And like I feel like in D&D we kind of run through this process of, you know, we talk about the three pillars, you know, exploration, combat, and role play, you know, a lot. And it feels like, you know, I have a GM who I play with, who is in all cases a very good dungeon master. His descriptions are great. His ability to, you know, build suspense, to grow story, to lace plot points together, to, you know, include backstory, you know, all the things that you would want from a GM. But one thing that I always find myself lacking from his style is that it's almost predictable that I know if we've had a heavy role play session one week, next week we're gonna have combat. Like I almost can guess that next week is gonna be fucking combat without
You want
even
it to be
like
satisfying.
you know?
You want to use all angles of the game. That's fair.
Yeah, but I think to your point, and also yours, Logan, is like as players, we almost are like pre-programmed to go into a combat situation, rolling initiative and getting ready to get our hands bloody, right? As opposed to like exploring all the options. Like it's rare, it is rare that a combat is diffused in a way that is
That's a great point.
and you know that's like entertaining, that I think, you know, it's fulfilling, all of those things. It's I don't know why that happens. I feel like
unless you got a druid, you're killing it. Unless you got a druid that's going to talk to the creature through some sort of
Baldur's
arcane
Gate's
ability.
a great example of that. You get to talk to so many more people. I really think that initiative being rolled is sort of this unfortunate Pavlovian bell. Everyone's like, oh, I'm going to use the abilities that half of the player's handbook has given me to blow this thing up. Like that sounds like fun. As a pretty fun example of that, if you're familiar with the Banderhobs in D&D, it's just a big frog guy, and the whole thing that you do is you conjure them up from like mud and sticks with witch magic, and all they have this natural inclination to go seek something out and eat it and either bring it back to you or kill it. They're like weird CR6 assassins. So I had one in a game that I'm running where I just make up like constant random little monster creatures, sort of like in Avatar how they have platypus bears and stuff. I gave my characters a moss sheep, who was just a sheep that can like grow moss and mushrooms as a food source that walks around. It looks like a little boulder when it sits down. So they picked one up and they took it to their camp, and a few days later this Banderhob shows up and it can't talk because it doesn't know how, and it's like, give me that. And it's like, that's mine. And it tries to communicate in like loose writing that that sheep is its property. So they finally hand it over. It's this really tense situation, and immediately it just gobbles it. And you're like, what? So they started attacking, and I finally got to this safe point where it was like, please don't kill me, let me explain. And it went on to communicate that it was summoned by a witch, or a hag specifically, to like fight a couple of bandits, and everybody in the process died but the Banderhob. So the Banderhob couldn't complete its contract and was doomed to like exist forever because it, you know, it didn't do the thing it was made for. So it wanders out and it finds this really abusive shepherd with a bunch of moss sheep. It eats the shepherd and it hangs out with the moss sheep, and it uses the witch's like staff and hat to keep them all invisible and keep them safe. So the party shows up, accidentally steals one, and now this huge creature's there, like fighting and eating the things, and they didn't understand it until the whole situation was over. But it was a lot of fun for them to realize that and then play with it in a different way, where now they recruited the guy. He just walks around their island and checks in every 4 days, like instead of having him dead, which he was very close to being. One player was like, let's not do this, let's hear him out. It's fun.
Do you know what? I feel like that's a real thing in D. But right at the end of the day, let's talk about D&D as a TTRPG system. It's designed as a strategic combat like role-playing game. You know, it's based
on a 60s or 70s game called Chainmail that was just that. It was just like almost chess.
Yeah. And so I think, you know, it is a thing of like players just assume, cool, we've got to fight and kill this thing. But to me,
is it just players, or is it players and when the word initiative is spoken by the DM, what percentage of the DM's mindset is saying also they can get out of this without there being a point of damage?
That is a good point.
It is a good point. I think it's a. Do you know? I feel like I often give people or at least in my head, I'm like, if you want to talk to this thing, feel free to talk to the thing, but also like, you don't have to if you don't want to. But like, I think the thing that you mentioned in that little story is the moral compass. And the moral compass is something that I love to play with. And I think it's such a powerful tool of being like, you know, and it's a common one that you see in like movies and television where there's a young child or someone stealing from someone, right? They're breaking in and they're stealing stuff. They're constantly stealing things, and it's a problem. It's destroying this shop, and you know, they're not able to keep the doors open. And when you initially meet the store owner, you're like, man, these fucking thieves. You're like, sons of bitches. And then you actually meet the thieves and you see that actually the thieves are just trying to feed their family and are just trying to survive. They're trying to like keep, you know, they're trying to like just like pretty much survive or whatever it is. And then you get this beautiful moment of players being like, ah, shit, like, do we enact justice because the societal laws of this world dictate us to do so on this quest that we're in or whatever?
Yeah, it's also a fun dilemma just in that context. Everyone's losing. Who do we help?
Yes.
Continue your thought.
Greater goods.
No, dude, you're exactly right. The greater goods, and like the everyone's losing is something that I feel like it's such a like we recently had, so in our actual play series, our big actual play series called the Sky Realm, we had this big thing that was going on, which is a young half-elf gentleman was framed for murder so that the imperial government could enact a curfew on the downtown poor people, basically the poverty-stricken area of the city, to enact a curfew to put them under harsher conditions and be able to oppress them even further, basically.
That sounds familiar.
Our players then were like, okay, we are going to break that guy out. And not only that, but because he was being held at a water reservoir, and in our world, water is a very finite resource. It's something that's super valuable.
That's fun to play with. I like that.
Yeah, it's super great, dude. It's one of my favorite things in the whole world. Shout out to Dune. And they break into this water reservoir, and the plan that they come up with is, and they're working with a rebel group of vigilantes who are called the Water Runners. They steal water from the Imperials and give it to the poor people, basically. That's like who they're working with to do this heist. Heist.
The under-government.
Exactly. And so they go in, 2 teams. One team basically just unleashes the water and like basically opens the valve and just starts the water flowing, basically. The other team are breaking in and getting the guy out of there, basically.
Hmm.
At the end of all of this, they come back together, and what they realize they've actually done is because as part of this, one of their allies, they got someone else to set up a distraction by starting like a small riot in downtown. They also have alliances with some of the mafia in the city as well that were helping them with this heist as well. And what our players caused, and it's one of my favorite things in our whole series that we've done, is they all come back, they're like, yes, we got Barnaby, we saved him, and we released the water. We stole a bunch of water, and we released the rest of it. We're going to be able to help the people. And what followed that was the city experienced its third big riot, which was met by the oppressive power being like, okay, now you're even more fucked. How dare you try and do this? It caused chaos across the city. Buildings were destroyed. Like, people were burnt out. Deaths were happening. The girl who started the riot as the distraction ended up getting killed. And it was like this big, like, shit show that our players basically caused by trying to do something nice.
That was great.
Now, since then, they've left. And
It's really nice to have players that appreciate that kind of story writing.
Oh, yeah. These guys were great.
Dude, it broke, like, it completely... It was such
it fucked our team up so bad.
We all experienced it quite differently, and it impacted our character arcs. Really changed just based on the fact that how you received the fact that we were successful in a very like failure
small scale way.
Small scale way that just impacted everything else in a big time negative way. It was a super powerful moment for our group.
I like that.
100%, and it shook you guys. You know, the Mafia Don was killed because of it, because you didn't tell him that you knew that the Imperials were coming for him. The girl that you guys had aligned with, who, you know, had some allegiances with the Imperial people, she was killed. And they left. They left the city because they'd done what they'd done. The thing was up, and they left. And since then, they have no idea what's going on in the city. I know very well that
might be a question I might ask the next session.
I know very well that things are very bad in that city right now. That the people are because of the repercussions of their actions. It's been catastrophic for the NPCs that live in that city and that are now dealing with a very pissed off, oppressive government that exists there now.
And since the water's gone, it's their resource that's missing, not the rich people's.
Exactly, dude.
Exactly. Can I make a connection to to a couple things we talked about with combat and with this type of situation? It feels like a big value as a player would just be a little bit more inquisitive. Like in a combat situation, I like my takeaway from our 5 minutes ago was like, next time I'm in combat, before I get into any actions or anything, I'm gonna have a little dialogue just to get a little feel for what's going on. That's gonna be my my typical pattern when I go into combat, is just to kind of see how much danger are we in. Is this going to, for sure, 100%, is the DM looking to clean us out, or do we have a way to maneuver? And also in your situation, just to get a little bit more facts about how is this going to impact the wider situation. I think more inquisitiveness, because it feels like as a player, sometimes you almost get robotized. I don't know if that's a word, into the plot, right? You're marching lockstep into where you feel like the DM wants you to go. And sometimes to break out of that, I think can be a lot more I don't know, rewarding for everyone.
Yeah. I would say, to build on that process, that thought process, almost a good sort of solution in a way of thinking to the problem that you presented, where it's just those three brackets of exploration, communication, combat. To have two of any of them happening at the same time makes it that much more exciting, where you have to explore or engage in combat and deal with the terrain, or you have to talk to someone while you're fighting them. That's a really fun thing to sort of consciously plan for as a DM, I think.
Is that like a rule? Or are we just making stuff up right now that is important?
Those three, I think, are.
But I mean, at the coupling two of those at any given
We're making
time.
that up, yeah. I'm saying cool. Building on the thought process that you had. That's a good thing to consciously think of while you're writing. Oh, let's do this and this. Which if you're ever making anything new, just combine two old things. You're done. That's what birth is, literally.
Do you know what? I think that's really, it's a really good point, and I think it's underdone in a lot of ways. To me, the other thing that I think, I personally feel is a big issue in amongst the TTRPG space is consequences. Now,
Hmm.
often a GM, will be like, "Oh, you pissed off your warlock patron, no more magic for you," kind of thing. But really, at times it feels like there's not wider consequences. The world isn't evolving and moving with the players sometimes. It's something that I've experienced with a couple of GMs, and I've seen in a couple of actual plays where I'm like, huh, did killing that thing who does that, what's that thing's circle?
Yeah,
What like
you want
what
you want the
exactly,
whole
go ahead,
world
go
to
ahead.
be alive, and I think there's a book called The Anatomy of Story that describes every character that you have. They're not islands; it's a web of
Hmm.
characters. So when you pull at a thread, or you burn one, or you break one, that affects the whole structure of the story and the world if it's living. So I really like that point
Yeah,
you're
dude,
making.
I love that web analogy. I've never heard that before,
Mm.
but that's
Mhm.
dead on. I think it's super, super important. And it relates back to the combat thing. When you have a creature that you're trying to make interesting or things like that, the consequences of even just entering combat, whether it be for
Mhm.
your players and their resources themselves, whether it
Yeah,
be for, the world and the existence of the timeline, or even just, that creature that they're fighting in its like circle of close things, those
yeah.
consequences
You want to
ripple
tether
outwards.
every bullet point in the story to another one, or to a
Mm.
location, like you're saying. You want to have them tethered so that when you destroy something, you cut those ties, and there are consequences. Things are going to loosen, some stuff might fly away for characters, and they might be mad
Mm.
at you. Like, it's
Mm.
fun to think of just the consequences to any tiny action. And of course, you want to reward your players too. You can't just have everything be bad.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Like I think do you know what's interesting as well? Like I love that so a good example of recently, we had a session where we're a bunch of detectives in this world, and I basically kicked this rock accidentally because out of
Mhm.
frustration, and it uncovered something that we ended up needing to find out, and I was like, oh holy shit. So massive reward for accidental decision that I made,
Yeah.
followed then by, literally a couple sessions later, we thought that we had done something good by shutting down this portal that was going to cause chaos. Turns out one of our NPCs that's with us, he is then taken away from us because we fucked up his like side backstory
Mm.
of life, and his warlock patron is then super pissed at us.
Yeah.
And I came away from the first session being like, hell yeah, woo, like that was sick. And then I came away from the next session like, what the
Oops.
fuck? Why? Like, how did we fuck this so bad? How have we
Mhm.
lost this character? Now he was my favorite GM NPC, like son of a bitch. And I
Mm.
think both of those feelings as a player, and I had to say to the GM, because he was like, oh, he said to me afterwards, he was like, I hope you're not too frustrated. I know you were
Mm.
really frustrated that you lost Callum at the end. And I was like, no, dude, that emotion that I'm feeling is so positive. Like, I'm so happy
Yeah.
you made me frustrated. That
Just
means
to
I
be
care.
engaged. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's always a good thing for
100%.
GMs to do, just at the end of the game, approach someone who you might have pissed off.
Yeah.
Just
Dude,
see, like, how'd the game go? See if people
you're,
appreciate stuff like that, and then you can build your pacing. It's good.
dude, you're so right, dude. I think something that's, again, undervalued in the GM space. And I think it's often because newer GMs kind of get into, like you said, everyone has to do their time at McDonald's. And during that time at
Mhm.
McDonald's, everyone's just like, I'm going to tick the GM boxes and do what I must do. Where I think a lot of the beautiful stuff that GMs can really do happens outside of the game sometimes. Talking to your players about, like,
Yeah.
cool, so far you're at this point in your character's arc. Where do you kind of see them going from here? Where are
Mm.
you hoping that they
Yeah.
kind of, end up? Are you wanting to kind of turn and start betraying the party? Are you wanting to, have this
Hmm.
other motive that's going on? Do you want to actually just be a full assist player, and you're here to just do anything and everything you can to make sure this party's success? Like, asking those questions and developing that relationship actually with the players and
Hmm.
their characters outside of the game often feels to me just as valuable as what happens in the game
And
sometimes.
I think I would have to say that the same is true in the opposite direction. As a GM, I'm so grateful when a player comes to me,
Mm,
like in the game that I'm doing, just the home game. Someone was like, "I want to explore a different character for a little while. I want the one that I'm playing to go off and like seek something." And we
mm,
talked it out, and eventually she was just like, "My character is a druid and like a ranger. So if you could find a way to have nature overwhelm them so that they go and seek like magic instead. Like
mm,
they need evidence that nature isn't the only thing at their side and they're not the one winning it. So I
mm,
brought in this storm giant who's conquered like a whole town and they're just sitting there like, I think I might be God and nothing's disproving that. So they
mm,
show up and this thing can literally like flick and the wind behind it will just flow and bellow. And it's this overwhelmingly intimidating creature. Like it one shot people at random and you're like, let's leave. And it
mm.
was just a lot of fun to build this crazy impactful scene just because a player had a request and they wanted me to do something with it.
Man, I
Love that.
fucking love that, dude. I love that so much. And
I think a lot of it also has to do with like
before I need to interlude,
almost like the
sorry.
commitment of the DM. Like I guess there's different levels of quality of DM and storytell. There's some storytellers that are brilliant at weaving together, several aspects of stories or undercurrents
Yeah.
of stories or side characters and having all that
Mhm.
beautifully interact and come and go and flow and all that.
I
And I
I
think,
really appreciate it, but also I wouldn't want to belittle people who like simpler stories. Like a kick down the door is just as much fun.
yeah, it's true. And like, I think a lot of it comes from, and I think one of the things that's been consistent in this conversation is communication or
Yeah.
just questions, just, the
The proof of engagement.
yeah, engagement of just like whether it's above table in the game, all different aspects. I think whatever in relationships
Mhm.
outside of in real life, whatever
Well, yeah, yeah.
communication is the way, is kind of the one. But um, yeah, really, really interesting. I think the other thing that came to mind as we've been talking, I think you mentioned it lightly earlier on, was the concept of improvisation and
Mm,
um, how how important is improvisation to you as far as in terms of like with a capital I, like the precepts or the fundamentals of improvisation when you're a player? Are you looking at like how serious are you about that world as opposed to just playing D&D in an organic way and trying to go with the flow and all of that versus being an improvisational in the definition of improvisation
Uh,
player?
that's a good question. I think that almost pertains more to like how a person conducts themselves as opposed to just being a player, because either you're prospecting or you're improvising.
Mm,
So the question almost sounds to me like, am I someone who likes to plan more or do I like to play it by ear? And I
mm,
think I've learned just planning only gets you so far, and a lot of the
mm,
time it'll get you just as far as playing it by ear and taking notes as you go.
mm,
So it's a lot of fun, and I would say I found a really comfortable groove in playing my character where, oh, I have a spontaneous inkling that my character's gonna doubt themselves right now, and that'll be a little arc for like a couple of sessions, and then we just go and do that, and that's fun. Or to listen to the active moments. It's really fun to play spontaneous characters who react so powerfully to these villains because they're not predisposed to think about how they act. So
mm,
if there's a big bad guy that I don't like and he's standing there with a huge like spiked mace like literally weighing down the floor, I'm going to tell him to fuck off
mm.
because I don't like him. And it's nice to know that the consequences are just as spontaneous as the actions that I'm taking as a character. And the only downside I would say is that puts the DM on their toes a little bit too much if they're not prepared for a character
Yeah.
who's entirely improvised.
You know what I've done in the past? Tell me if you guys have done this or not. Like, as above table, if I'm feeling, like, say during a round of combat, if I'm feeling insecure about what my options are, am I going to use this spell? Am I going to use this,
oh
whatever?
yeah, I know what you're gonna say.
I'll
I've
actually
seen you
convey
do
that to
this
my
loads.
character. My
Yeah.
Yeah.
character, like, having that insecurity or
Hmm.
that doubt or that, confusion about stuff. And that, I don't know, it seems to me to help it aligns. It gets me
Yeah.
closer. It gets Tom closer to whatever the character Tom's playing. That
Mhm.
realism of being in that, whatever you want to call it, the flow state or that character state as much as you can. Whereas you are like literally, whether you want to call it above table or below or on the table, it's all kind of the same. That
Yeah,
has
you
helped me
want
in the
to
past.
sort of emotionally resonate with your character in the moment. And if you're
Yeah.
not feeling how the character feels, that disconnect can, rear its head every once in a while and
Yeah.
make you
I
not know
fully
where to go.
I fully agree with that. I think, and part of that in a weird way, I think is, D&D in a weird way is like, I've heard people talk about, it's like a superhero game. These are incredible people doing incredible feats of incredible
Yeah.
things. But often it feels like some of the best characters I've ever seen have been the ones with the most flaws, the ones that
Mhm.
are exceedingly flawed and, have what I would call grounded struggles. And, like, Tom plays a character who's a turtle. He's super cute. He's literally like the like aw of our group. Like everyone just
Mm.
loves Geo and is just super like enamored by him. And Geo is like he's royalty. Like in all other like senses of the thing, you'd be like, wow, this character is gonna be like a super badass like turtle cleric knight kind of thing.
Mm.
And Tom just plays him as a bit of a blubbering mess. And he's so perfect because there's so many times where Tom has been like, I'm going to try and do the right thing, knowing full well that he's definitely not doing the right thing. And I think that is just so powerful as an improvisational tool to be able to play on the flaws of your character. I played one once that was like, I was a Colossus Slayer, some like homebrew Colossus Slayer or Titan Killer Ranger, basically. But I was
Mhm.
afraid of any creature that was a size bigger than me. So my family were like this family of like Titan killers, and I was just like, I just don't do big things. Like they scare the absolute fuck
That's
out of me.
great.
And that allowed me to have
Yeah.
moments where we were in combat, and I'd be like, you guys deal with this. I'm out of here later. And I would just fucking run and just be like, I'm going to get as far away from this moment as feasibly possible because it's truly like this character would just not be game for dealing with this problem that's in front of
That's
me.
great. I think that's
And
kind of an echo of the lesson that Stan Lee learned when working early in comics, the father of superheroes. He stepped away from his job at I forget before Marvel what he did, but he immediately started working on the Fantastic Four, and I think pretty soon after that was Spider-Man. And his whole idea for these characters is that he wants them to be more people than heroes. He wanted the hero to be the sideline part, and I think exactly what you're saying is a great sort of point.
it also adds like, to me, it adds ability for arc. If you rock up and you're like, what's up? I'm the grizzled veteran that's a badass. I've endured
Mhm.
everything and I'm not afraid of anything. It's like, okay, cool. Where do you go from here, buddy? Like, what's your arc here?
It's fun to
Because
have
you're
a
all,
failing after that.
yeah,
I made a
I
guy
agree
who
with you.
like
I agree with
I
you.
think had his arms ripped off, and he went all the way back to level 1. It's like
I love that.
how far the mighty fall. Could I hit the restroom for just a quick minute?
Yeah, go
Yeah,
for
sure,
it.
go
Yeah,
for
all
it, go
good.
for it.
Go for it. Ask about the leg thing.
Oh yeah, so
Ask about the leg kick thing.
my
That's fucking
curiosity was
funny.
when dude got his like arms chopped off, did you then start making him more and more proficient with like wild leg kicks and like knee stomps and like
Um,
flying switch kicks and all this stuff?
that was the idea for a minute.
And then was it bionics?
No, actually, he became a pretty high-level monk through his story, and at some early point on, he was able to resonate with a parallel version of himself, so he
Oh,
could
nice.
focus his ki to attune to that person and literally borrow, so he had like psionic arms that he would
Ooh,
use.
That's cool.
That's fucking
So he'd
awesome.
walk around as like this scary looking monk guy just in a big cloaked robe, and then these golden or like glowing blue arms would appear outside and just chop
Love it.
somebody in the back of the head.
I love that. Love that so much. And you know what? What's interesting is, I just said to Tom, when you're at the top, the only place to go is down. When you're at the bottom, the only place to go is up. And so it
Yeah.
makes sense, if you do have a character that's, I am the grizzled vet, then you need to humble them there needs to be
Yes.
some sort of humbling there that needs to be done. Have you are you familiar with the Fantasy High series done by Dimension 20?
I'm familiar with Dimension 20, but as you said before, I don't watch too many live plays, if that's what it is.
Okay, yeah. It is an actual play, and they have a character called Fabian Seacaster, played by Lou Wilson. Phenomenally done. It's possibly one of my favorite character arcs in all of history. He very much is a super confident like jock, son of like a badass pirate who has sailed the seas, and he's just meant to be this like badass character. He gets really severely humbled, and like you did, goes back to level 0. Actually, they
Oh,
take away all class from him entirely and have him just being like nothing.
that tasty civilian stat block.
Yeah,
4 hit
exactly.
points, I think.
Exactly. So they just raked him back to nothing. And he ended up building himself back up in the same class, but then also multi-classing as a bard as well. Spoilers for anyone who hasn't watched, as a bard. And he just has this beautiful arc of him becoming more of himself, realizing that he's not this cocky jock, that actually he loves dance. And that he really loves dance, and he really loves using this dance to be his thing. And never I've never seen it before like that in D&D, but I was just blown away because he's this fighter who's like rapier wielding. He cut out his own eye. He's super badass, and then he comes back and he's like, I like to dance with the sheet and flourish it around me, and it makes me feel a
Pirate
lot more
ballerina.
elegant. Exactly. And
That's great.
and I just loved it. I thought it was a really beautiful arc that, like you said, you started at the top and humbled himself down to the bottom, and then worked his way back up to again be someone who was back at the top.
Yeah.
Someone who was.
I like characters who, you get to the top of a mountain, you fall off, you seek out a different peak. A lot of these characters will find a groove in something else that is a new high point for them, because that's what you want for characters. Is as they're developing, you always want them to get back to their own, sort of accomplish their dreams in the One Piece sense. Just get back to whatever top they think is out there waiting for them.
Yeah,
I love that, dude. I love that One Piece analogy. That's a super solid point.
We've got a few more minutes. I wanted to just circle back to your work with Runesmith, and what right now is like the most exciting thing for you as you look forward over the next several months or what have you. What are you excited about creating? What direction are you going in that you feel like is needing to be served right now?
By the way, we loved all the content you've made so far. What else amazing stuff? What other
So
sick
what's
stuff are
new
you
on the
bringing to
menu,
us?
Ratatouille?
Did we need? I guess we needed that qualifier. Sorry about that. The way I
No, that's okay. That's actually a really well-timed question, because this year I took last year off from my channel, so there was a big gap. The algorithm's not a fan of me, and I can't really fall back on old series, so I've been kind of bumbling through a bunch of new topics to see what functions. And I think I'm finally finding a groove in just highlighting monsters or concepts or encounters in a new way. And that's fun to explore. Like the last video, just the goblin who can't die. That was the whole idea. And it's just a highlight of Nilbogs. So it's going to be fun to do that. But like I said, as I learned from my characters that I play, it's better to just be spontaneous and not plan too far ahead for these things, because if they fail, they fail.
Yeah. And dude, putting all your chips in one basket is one thing as well. I love the fact that you're like, I'm going to test this out, I'm going to test that out, and I'm going to, be spontaneous in that space. That's a great way to, it's a great mentality to have with YouTube creation and content creation as a whole.
It's nice to be passionate, but sort of cautiously detached from the projects you're working on, where it's like, I love this, but if it fails, it's no skin off my neck because I'm not anchoring myself to it. But in a different vein, I'm working majorly, if it's not Runesmith, it's Ghostfire, which is the Australian publishing company. Great guys. They have the sequel to my book, The Seeker's Guide, now to Enchanting Emporiums, which I got to work on, which was super fun. So that Kickstarter is out now. I'm not sure when this goes up, but it's currently out. I think it'll go till December 15th or something.
Nice.
And then in addition to that, I'm really enjoying working on my first board card game. So I'm actually later today I'm doing a game design meeting where we're just doing a playthrough, hammering out all the rules for it's like the Stibbles Codex sequel, but it's a board game with a bunch of dice. So hopefully it'll be fun.
Cool.
I'm having a lot of fun with it.
Hell yeah, dude! That, you know what, you can feel that. The little
Yeah.
the little smirk on your face as you said it. The little
It's
little
it's
bit of
genuinely so
excitement.
exciting. Yeah. That's just me and one guy, and we fall into a room and we keep hammering it out. So later this week, we're going to actually do a play test with other team members. So we'll see if what we're doing even makes sense to the layman.
Nice.
And if it's back to the drawing board, that's exciting. I'm not attached.
Nice, nice. That was good. Love that. Love that, dude. I just have to tell you, you know, from our end, you know, what you do is very inspiring. You know, I know you said you took some time off and whatnot, and I hope you know that, you know, your audience appreciates you, dude. We appreciate you coming back. We appreciate the work that you put in, and the effort that you put into all the stuff that you do. Also, I'll tell you what, dude, the way that you talk, I would love to get you at one of our tables sometime. I'd love to have you
That'd be
play at one
fun.
of our tables and try it out. But honestly, dude, yeah. Oh, the other thing I was going to mention is with the Kickstarter that's out now, and we can discuss this after the podcast a little bit more, but please let us know how we can help you promote that. We would love to chuck it in our Discord and, you know, kind of push that and help you guys
Yeah.
get a little bit of sight on that as well, just because, you know, you're an awesome person. You know, we
Appreciate that.
appreciate you, and like, not just you, but your content, the stuff you
Yeah.
bring to this community, and just everything across the board, dude. You're a kick-ass guy.
I would have to say that at the end of the day, my favorite thing is not the content that I make or like the books that I work on and put out or any of, you know, the tangible rewards that you could feasibly assume. It's really just the ability to inspire other people to not just do the same thing I'm doing, but do something more, do something a little bit better than what I'm doing. It's nice to feel sort of like the giant that other people get to stand on the shoulders of, or one of them, you know, shoulders of giants. But
Wow.
it's nice to see the newer generations of people who are like, I want to write a book too. Like, how do I do this? How do I do that? And reaching out. It's been a lot of fun to answer those questions and encourage people.
And I would say
Well,
just
fuck, man. I wish we'd reached out to you a fucking year ago.
All right.
what I will say is, like, behind the scenes, the conversations that you and I have had behind the scenes privately, and I won't share them here, but what I will say is your moral compass behind the scenes is ever consistent with what you portray in front of the camera as well. And I, you know,
Well, thank you.
I'm absolutely a testament to that. So appreciate it personally, but also just want to share that with, you know, with our communities, that you're legit. It's not just
And
very
that's a
kind of
rare
you, thank
fucking
you.
thing. That's a rare thing. I feel like, you know, we've definitely encountered some a-holes in this community, you know, that are like, hey, I'm your best friend in front of the camera, and then afterwards are like, all right, I'll catch you later, bye, you know, kind of thing. And you're like, oh, okay, see you then. So no, yeah, the consistency is super appreciated.
really appreciate it, dude.
Super appreciated, for sure. So can you tell us, one, what is this Kickstarter book that is currently in existence? Where can people find it? Then also, can you let people know where they can come check out this amazing new video content that you're making surrounding encounters, creatures, and all the other stuff?
I can do that, yeah. So The Seeker's Guide to Enchanting Emporiums is the sequel to The Seeker's Guide to Twisted Taverns, which was the second book that I did. And it was a huge, massive undertaking. That first book was overwhelmingly such a huge project, and there were so many layers that we wanted to do with it. This one, The Seeker's Guide to Enchanting Emporiums, which, as you said, can be found on Kickstarter. It just Google it. I think there was actually a very similarly titled book that came out around the same time, but you should be able to find it. And
we'll drop links in the description.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. I'll send you one. It was directed by James Hayek. If you're familiar, he did Matthew Mercer's campaign setting. He was one of the lead writers for that. And he's been amazing. He just collected a bunch of prolific writers in the scene. You have Ginny D, who wrote one. So it's sort of the celebration of the D&D community in the form of the second thing that you think about when you're playing a game. It's like, okay, you all start in a tavern, you all meet in a tavern. Let's go shopping before we go on an adventure. So it's stage 2. And it's been a lot of fun to see all this writing come through every time we get art from the Ghostfire team. I love their art directors. Working with them in the early stages was a miracle, to just be able to be like, I love this sketch, can you do this or that, and see all the words come to life. And if you need a link, you can go to my channel, Runesmith, on YouTube. That one's probably easier to look up, and the recent videos, it'll be in the description. Obviously, I want to promote that.
Hell yeah. Guys, thank you so much for watching. And if you found this podcast, we really, really appreciate it. Please, 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 please go check out Logan's stuff. His content is not only great information, super easily digestible, very, very fun, and something that I guarantee you after, a video or two, you're going to be subscribing to, hitting that bell notification, being like, I want to know when the next one comes out. But we really, really appreciate it, dude. You've been absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for taking the time to just talk to us today out of your super busy schedule. And
this has been fun. I'm glad we got around to it finally. And when it does go up, shoot me a link. I'll send it on Twitter.
Of course, dude. We really, really appreciate that. As always, we've been Homie and the Dude, father and son, TTRPG, MMA team. And we would love anyone who is listening to this to join our Discord server. It's a small community of amazing people. It's diverse, it's inclusive. In there, we shoot the shit. We have a lot of fun. We will be running some free D&D workshops coming up where you can partake in activities as well as also learn some new things along the way, which we're super excited to host those. So if you're interested in being part of that community and joining what we call the Familia, we would love to see you guys there. Other than that, Logan, dude, thank you for taking the time, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode.
It's been fun.
Thanks, homie. Thanks, Logan.